Welcome to Architrave Gaming. I'm the Archmaster, Matthias. This is a channel about helping you make your D&D games and worlds better by taking the crazy world building ideas that I've come up with over the last 3 years and maybe combining them with a few ideas from my own game system, which I advertise as 5e but fixed. Today we're starting off with people polymorphing when they die of old age. So, what if your family heirlooms were literally your family? What if that octagonal table in your kitchen is actually one of your grandparents? You can have a big mansion with a big ancient family, and every item in the mansion is one of your ancient family, right? Maybe you can animate them with like a soul, or like their own soul is still like in the object or something. So it's like Beauty and the Beast, where each item has a personality and it's alive because that's one of your ancestors that just polymorphed into an object. And maybe if the power of the family, the prestige, the magical ability, something is kind of weak, then they just when Grandpa dies, he literally his body just polymorphs into a table. It's like, all right, well, we have a new table for our house. Like, what if all your ancestors are actually What if all your ancestors actually polymorphed into items, furniture, sword, suit of armor, a magic wand, anything, right? It depends on what they did and who they were and all that, but they polymorph into items. Your grandmother might polymorph into a knife set because she was a great chef. Well, now she's split up into multiple things. Those are like, each of those is like a shard of her soul, right? And so what happens when you split those up? And like, lots of cool stuff that you can do with this idea. You can take it and be like, in this region of my world, or like in the whole world, whatever you want to, and be like, when people die of old age, they polymorph into items. And that's where the idea of family heirlooms came from. You keep your family with you. Of course you would, right? It's totally normal. It's not morbid. It's not, oh, we should bury them. It's like, no one's ever buried. That concept doesn't exist. This is the normal way, right? Next, open air dungeon. So, oh, man, I smacked that. This is essentially the idea that, okay, so you have like, your settlement down here, right? And it's in the valley between two mountains. And the dungeon isn't like underground. We reverse it. We say that the settlement is like low in the valley or maybe underground, and the dungeon is actually a bunch of ruins and whatnot built up on the sides of the mountain. So when you go dungeon delving, you're actually climbing up the mountain and going up instead of going down, and you're clearing it and whatnot. And then when you're done, instead of, you're in the 10th level of a dungeon, you have to backtrack all the way up. When you're done, you have like, a Legend of Zelda glider or something, right? You have Featherfall, you have Fly, you have potions, something that your settlement supplied you with. And so when you're done, you just jump off the mountain and fly back home, right? It's a really quick escape, really quick turnaround. It's just a cool little world building idea. Why not try out that setting and put your players there instead of, here's a regular land, there's a forest, and there's a little castle with a hill with a castle on it, and there's a dungeon underground. Same thing we've seen 1,000 times. Why not do this? This is cool. It's interesting. An area of perpetual thunderstorms. Apparently, there's a place in Venezuela that has perpetual nighttime thunderstorms. I don't know why. I just saw a quick video about it, but it's a place where there's every night just thunderstorms everywhere. It's like, why not do that? Throw that in your world. That's one of the most mundane things you can do because it exists in real life. But go ahead, do it. A place of perpetual thunderstorms. How does that affect economy? You can go basic, boring, obvious stuff where it's like, everyone has lightning rods on their houses. Everyone builds tall cathedrals in like big spots where they're like super tall, big tall towers, and then all the houses are near them, and then you have like a little gap, and then more houses, and then a cathedral. And maybe if you want to do like Superland, you're like, they have electricity. It's like, that doesn't make it fantasy anymore. You can just do so much stuff. And if you say lightning's actually magical, like I do in my world, where it can paralyze you and teleport you and has all sorts of magical powers, it can imbue you with strength. It can do so many things. It can make you like fly and teleport. It's super cool, right? So they harness that, or they like purposely get struck by lightning, and so everyone in this place, they all have like glowing lightning eyes, and they can teleport around and hit super hard because they like run into you with their lightning attack and whatnot. And like this whole culture, the city, this wherever you can say it's one little settlement, it's a town, it's a village, it's a single wizard's tower, or it's the entire nation or the whole world. As the world builder, you can do whatever you want, but the idea that the lightning just strikes all the time everywhere, it's a cool idea. All right, permanent spell effects from nature. When people use magic, it usually has a short duration, usually not more than 24 hours, but even more usually something like a minute, 10 minutes, or an hour. But in this idea, if you use the forces of nature, meaning elements or places of natural power, then it can be permanent and is much more likely to be permanent. or at least very long lasting. So this is an explanation of why people go out and search out places of power in the world, because they want their magical effects to be permanent, right? So you can say that the wizard, he can cast his fireball spell, or he can cast polymorph, he can cast something, but if he goes to this place of natural power and he casts a spell there, then it's super long lasting, right? And it's permanent. If he wants to curse the king, he can curse him for 10 minutes while he's holding concentration, or he can make it a permanent curse. So it makes people seek out these places, and maybe these places have been found a long time ago. So there's like a wizard's tower here, or this one has been sealed off, or the king built his palace there because he doesn't want anyone else using it, right? You can have so many interesting places, and there can still be a few of these not fully controlled, and those are like in dungeons and whatnot. So if the player wants to cast, aid on himself and his allies, right? Give them all an extra 5 HP. Then if you go down into the 5th level of the dungeon and cast aid spell there, then it's permanent, right? You have a permanent buff, right? So stuff like that. You don't even have to give the players this objective. Hey, players, go out and do this thing. It's like, hey, by the way, there's a permanent spell effect place here, and you can balance it by saying you can only cast up to 1st level, or up to 2nd, or up to 3rd level spells in this place. Anything higher won't be permanent, right? You have to go down to level 10 for anything up to 5th level spells, and then you have to go to another plane of existence for something above that, right? You can balance it however you want, right? But the idea that there are different places, and if you cast a spell there, then it's more powerful or permanent, players are going to love that. It's like, ooh, cool, so I can go there and I can cast it. Like, if you have power gamers, or if you have min-maxers, or players who are just interested in like playing the game the way it was intended to be, like a dungeon crawler and a power fantasy, which is kind of what it is, then they should love that idea. Next and last, a place that manifests your dreams or imagination. What if, the plane of dreams or something, right, kind of leaked out into the world? I was watching a movie, Galaxy of Terror. You may have heard of an old movie, The Forbidden Planet, with a robot, and but in both of these, your fears or the things you imagine or some part of your psyche manifests as real, right? And so one person was afraid he would get killed by bugs, and that there was this giant bug that slit his throat and killed him, right? So there's this plane of dreams, or some energy, or miasma, or just an arcane zone. You have like a wild magic zone, you have a dream zone, right? A manifestation zone. And so people there, their fears, their dreams, their imagination, whatnot, manifest. And maybe it manifests only once a year or something, right? It doesn't have to be overpowered and constant. You can balance it. But yeah, it manifests your imaginations and your dreams and fears, and maybe when people first get there, they're killed by just crazy monsters that come from nowhere, and that they're super terrified, and people leave, and then it's abandoned for 100 years, and people, new people who didn't hear the stories, they go and move back, and then they're also terrorized, and all sorts of things, right? And then the party has to get there and figure out, wait, it's anything you imagine. They ask the person, hey, what'd your son die by? And he's like, oh, he died by, a flying basilisk, and they're like, that doesn't exist. That's interesting. Wow, GM, you're really creative with monsters. And their parent is like, oh yes, he was right. He always knew he'd get killed by a flying basilisk. And they're like, he did? I was like, yeah. And then they hear that again and again, like, oh, he fell into a hole in the ground and suffocated. It serves him right, because he was always complaining about there not being enough air underground. It's like, oh, and then someone else is like, oh yeah, he drowned in the river. He always told me he couldn't swim, and he always complained about it, and looks like he was right. It's like, huh? So they start getting a hint that's like, wait a minute, all these people died by the thing they feared, or the thing they thought they would die by. And so the players can learn that and say, hey, everyone, think positive thoughts. Think gold falling from the sky. And then it happens, and the players and everyone are like, wait a minute, we can use this, right? Like it can start a revolution. There's lots of cool stuff you can do with an idea like this. That's all for now. Like and subscribe. There's a $5 Patreon link in the description if you want to fund me actually quitting my job and doing this full time, giving you all super awesome world building ideas, really fantastic stuff that makes it not just boring, bog standard fantasy, Forgotten Realms, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien fantasy. I'm also actively looking for team members. If you want to join, leave a comment. Tell me, hey, I like your world building or your game system, which is 5e but fixed, and if you want to help me build out the subclasses and this and that for my game, or you want to help me build the world to make products with, either way is good. Thank you. Have a nice day. God bless.